There's no formula for making great games, especially if it's a brand new IP or a first in the series. Developers are essentially just experimenting with any idea that seems vaguely good to see what works, all the while trying to put out fires that keep popping up because the game engine keeps exploding every 5 minutes. In the same way that movies are described as miracles because of just how difficult they are to make, getting a game right is equally as bloody hard, and even the very best ones have certain stretches, levels, or sections that come close to completely tanking the whole experience. Nobody's perfect is the classic quote from Some Like It Hot, and what I have to keep having to remind my colleagues of every time they catch me making sweet love to cans of hairspray, but that goes doubly for these games. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 infuriating levels that almost derailed great games. Number 10. The Jet Skis, Uncharted. Even though Uncharted was a breakout title for Naughty Dog and their first real foray into story-driven real-world narratives, it was very much a practice run for something greater. It's still a fantastic game, but playing it now, it's clear the devs hadn't quite nailed down everything that makes Uncharted, well, Uncharted, throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. That's probably how players ended up with the jet ski segments, which were novel attempts to add some variety between the combat and the climbing. The problem was, these sections felt a little half-baked, and surprisingly arcadey as well, as you had to blow up conveniently placed explosive barrels, avoid rocks and obstacles, and be keenly aware of the thugs bombarding you with rocket fire. And if there's one thing that clues you into the fact that the developers also worked on Crash Bandicoot, it's these jet skis. They practically function identically. It's genuinely uncanny how similar they both feel, despite the games being entire generations apart. Something like this might have been fun in Crash on the PS1, but it absolutely did not work in Uncharted on the PS3. Number 9. Demolition Man, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. There's a lot of fondness for GTA's PS2 era, where Rockstar were unstoppable in their pursuit to dominate the open-world genre year after year. However, they also became known for including a bunch of frustrating levels in their titles during this period as well, with CJ's goddamn train chase in San Andreas perhaps being the most infamous. For my money though, it's the demolition mission, accidental rhyme there, in Vice City, which had you remotely flying an RC helicopter into a construction site in order to plant bombs and blow the whole thing to smithereens. That was the worst of the bunch. The controls were finicky at the best of times, but getting this hunk of metal, plastic, and explosives in and out of the area was a complete nightmare. Not only was it difficult, but you've got to do it within a time limit as well, only increasing the likelihood of crashing straight into a beam. Games that drop new mechanics on you for a single mission deserve their own personal spot in hell, and it'll be Demolition Man meeting them all at the fiery gates. Number 8. A Quiet Exit, Metal Gear Solid 5. The entirety of Metal Gear Solid 5's second chapter randomly threw in huge, barely tied together plot developments between repeated missions from chapter 1, which is how you ended up with teammate Quiet being suddenly taken away from you. Suddenly, a mission pops up informing you that you have to save her from an enemy fortress, which, in theory, should be the kind of explosive set-piece director Hideo Kojima does so goddamn well. Unfortunately, despite a strong start, a good chunk of the mission is spent hunkered down and sniping wave after wave of incoming tanks. Tanks have always been formidable opponents in the MGS series, but here the developers completely take the piss. Every time you think you're done, a brand new batch of armored vehicles will roll over the hill as you repeat the same hide-and-shoot formula while also keeping your rockets stocked up. It's just so boring, and no amount of cool, well-choreographed CG cutscenes can mask how uninspired the mission's design actually is. And then, for no real reason at all, Quiet disappears at the end for good. Great, didn't want her in my squad anyway, so joke's on you, Kojima, eh? Hey? I'm dead inside. Number 7. Firefighting, The Evil Within 2. The Evil Within 2 is one of the best horror games of the entire generation, managing to maintain the scares of a linear Resident Evil game in a semi-open world sandbox full of inventive enemies to kill and hide from, and a great villain to chase. Sadly, none of those elements are present once the game hits its final third. Swapping out the big bad for a cult leader that transforms everything into a fire and brimstone hellscape, you spend the majority of the final act making your way through bland areas fighting these fire demons who are tough, yeah, but not the least scary. The bad mission in question is why these guys are so hated though, as you're forced to huddle next to another character and protect them from hordes of these incoming enemies. It's very video gamey, in a title that otherwise defies and subverts conventions. It lacks the flair the rest of the experience is fueled on, and is a segment that could have been cut entirely without damaging the quality of the final release. Number 6. The opening dungeon crawl, Oblivion. Look, alright, wait a second, please don't kill me. Oblivion was one of the defining games of its generation, properly introducing the mainstream to the Elder Scrolls series and showing everyone what open-world RPGs could be. But good lord, does it start off on the wrong foot. Conceptually, you couldn't ask for a better opening than the one in the 4th Elder Scrolls. As is franchise convention, you begin as a nameless stranger trapped in jail for an unknown crime when the Emperor himself arrives at your cell to use a secret escape tunnel, all the while telling you that you're destined for greatness. You join the posse, watch as your new pal is assassinated, and then spend the next 20 minutes fighting your way through caves of creepy crawlies. It's a glorified tutorial, which is fine. Expansive games like Oblivion can't just drop you into an open world without some form of training, but it does a terrible job of showing off the game's strengths. The enemies are uninspired, the caves themselves don't reflect how great Bethesda's environments can be, and it prioritizes action over role-playing. Number 5. Case 7-2, Dead Rising. Another bomb-based time trial, a very late mission in the original Dead Rising tasks you with going down underneath the game's mall in order to defuse a bunch of explosives. Unfortunately for you, not only do you have a set time limit to do it in, you're given a vehicle that can easily be destroyed, thousands of zombies in your way, a villain hounding you in their own vehicle, and no idea where any of these bombs are. Just one of these added elements would have been enough to earn the mission a spot on this list, but the fact that it takes an already time-sensitive experience and adds another time trial on top of it is just unforgivable. Whether you get lost in the labyrinth, lose your vehicle and have to make your way on foot, or get locked in an animation until you die, probably that one, you'll end up seeing the game over screen over and over again. Number 4, the Electro Chase, Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man, until Insomniac's version came around anyway, was always in the running as potentially being the best ever game the wall crawler had starred in. The way it brought the Ultimate Comics to life, which at the time were rejuvenating the Marvel brand as a whole, was pretty much perfect considering the technical limitations of the time, but the best part was fighting the reimagined villains. Most of Spidey's rogues gallery showed up, but it was Electro who was visually the most impressive. Casting down huge bolts of lightning that decimated the city in area of effect attacks, he was a real visual spectacle for 2003, cool in a way his weird mask-wearing regular universe alter ego could just never be. All that fell to the wayside though once you actually started fighting him. Forced to chase him across the city without falling behind, a mission type which plagued all of these early Spidey games now that I think of it. Every time you got close, he'd charge one of these AoE attacks, which you somehow always seemed to be in range of. Consequently, you'd constantly get locked into a blast that would send you flying, and Electro would shoot off and leave you far enough behind to end the mission completely. Number 3, the sewers, Enter the Matrix. As a rule, all sewer levels should be completely banned from video games. No matter how relevant they are to the plot, there's nothing less compelling than being trapped in a drab old sewer shooting goons for reasons. Enter the Matrix, other than maybe the old Spider-Man games, probably has the worst example of the sewer level the medium has ever seen. An overlong, labyrinthian mess where you can barely distinguish walls from the floor or the floor from the enemies. You're bound to get lost at least once while traversing the game's underground level. There's nothing interesting to see either, it is a sewer after all, and there's pitfalls around every corner. You could have set the level within a cardboard box and you wouldn't have lost a damn thing. In fact, it might have made it even better simply because of the novelty. Number 2, the Fair Play Race, Mafia. The original Mafia's Fair Play mission should have been a bit of throwaway fun. A nice little break from the shooting as players are given the chance to jump into a period-authentic race car and burn some rubber across a few laps. The only problem was that the players had never controlled a car like this before, which could barely turn to save its life and was faster than a speeding bullet, or at least it felt like it was. In their noble attempt to make it as realistic and compelling as possible, the developers designed this section by using a racing wheel. The problem was though, everyone at home was using a regular controller, which completely broke the balance and threw everyone off. To make matters worse, you had to come first to get to the next mission or you'd be sent straight back to the beginning. It should have been so simple, just a bit of fun, but it was anything but. Number 1, the Tanker, Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 was, by and large, a real return to form for the In Decline series. Although the first-person view and the new narrative focus wasn't to everyone's tastes, it did a great job of bringing the survival horror back to the forefront with an expansive mansion for players to explore and plenty of terrifying villains for them to encounter. But then, 2/3 of the way into the game, the devs completely dropped the setting they had been building up for the past 6 hours in favour of a nondescript tanker and a brand new character. While it was jarring to suddenly have a new environment to learn, there was potential here, don't get me wrong, as players could finally get some answers to the mysteries the game had otherwise been skirting around. Those answers did indeed come, but in the most frustrating way. Taking away most of your resources, the tanker was a chore to navigate, as you avoided enemies, abused their terrible AI until they eventually walked into explosives, and then just gunned them down without a second thought. Unlike the mansion, the ship just wasn't scary, and the switching gameplay transformed the enemies themselves into little more than annoying nuisances. So that's our list. I don't know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are there any levels you can think of that almost derailed their games, or do you secretly love the race car mission in Mafia? I know that's a lie because nobody does, because we all like nice things. Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, you've been watching WhatCulture, and I'll see you soon. Bye.